How is everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, live today on Friday, September the 13th, to bring you guys the last show of this week to go over some more of the game that we saw last night heading into week 2. We're going to go through the full slate today and talk in depth about a couple of the games on today's show, starting off with the game last night, right, between the Bills and the Dolphins. We're going to get into breaking all of that stuff down in the next couple segments. We're going to talk about the Bengals and Chiefs game and also some last-minute news here on the injury update as well heading into week 2. So stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up on today's show. And before I do get started on last night's game, I tell you guys every day, every time we're on here, if you guys have a question, comment, or any opinion you'd like to share during the show, we want to hear about it. Don't hesitate to let us know what you're thinking. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. Whether it's a quick comment, question, or opinion, it doesn't matter. Let us know what you're thinking. Now, if you want to make sure that your message stands out and it gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as exciting and as interactive as ever. But we still do have the alternate option, the old tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, which you can still use to tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there if you do prefer. We couldn't do this without your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you guys as part of our community. Please use that Super Chat feature and be part of our show here today. But now we can dive into what we saw last night, right? There was a game last night, obviously, between the Bills and the Miami Dolphins, but the biggest news of everything, the event was the game, right? But the biggest piece of news was Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, and how he suffered another concussion in his NFL career with basically, if you weren't watching the game like I was, with 4 minutes and 36 seconds left in the third quarter. The game was pretty much out of reach at this point, but even still, the starters were still out there, obviously, and it was a 4th and 4 basically around the Bills' 14-yard line. Tua trying to get the first down, the Miami Dolphins going for it, obviously, at this point. So Tua, no options are open. He drops back, then he steps up into the pocket. He tries to run forward towards the first down, and, he gets it, but he ends up getting hit by Damar Hamlin coming up to tackle him. And Andre, thanks for joining the show. Do you think he should retire? I'm going to get to that in just a second. But just let me break it down a little bit for some people that might not have watched it. Damar Hamlin comes up and, tries to tackle him. Tua dives head first pretty much into his chest, into his midsection, and that's where everything, turned pretty scary because from that point on, you saw Tua lay on his back. He really couldn't get up at all. His hands went into the, the fencing position, as they call it, and we saw it last time in Cincinnati, I believe, with him, and now we're seeing it again. He struggled to get up, but it wasn't, I think, as scary, obviously, as before, because last time he was stretchered off, but now he was able to get up after some time, after receiving some medical attention. He walked off under his own power with a little bit of a limp, and afterwards, obviously, he was diagnosed with a concussion, and that was all a scary moment, right? And how everything broke down afterwards. Mike McDaniel said, his head coach, that I'm just worried about the human being. I was just worried about my guy. It's not something you ever want to be a part of. You hope not to. And he also said that the last thing he's thinking about is a timetable, a time return for Tua after this. He just wants to make sure Tua's all right personally. And then you had the flood of reactions online, some well wishes from Damar Hamlin, Louis Riddick, Shannon Sharp, Des Bryant and Deion Dawkins on the other side of everything, expressing their well wishes and just talking about what they saw. And in those comments, I'll get to your question, Andre. The conversation now inevitably is, should he retire? And Andre, you also said, I just don't get why he's still not sliding. He lost weight to be quicker, just to not slide. And I do agree with that. It's weird because Tua's like obviously not the most athletic guy, and he did go through all that stuff. Getting leaner to be quicker to potentially do some more athletic things, right? But the biggest thing for him was to slide, right? In that moment, you kind of understand, the adrenaline and everything trying to come back, even though the game's kind of out of reach, why you just want to get it, so you kind of dive and not really think twice about it. But with him, he's been in this situation so many times that, they always teach you, I'm sure they always stress it, to dive feet first. And for him to dive basically head first into Damar Hamlin was confusing, but from that point on, it turned pretty scary. And should he retire? I think it's going to be a conversation, surely, because not only has it happened again, but after the last time, I think in 2022, around December, I want to say, Tua came out and said that it was floated around a little bit, the idea of him retiring. And now with this happening again, it's going to have to come up again, right? With his family, with himself, just internally. I don't think the Miami Dolphins will ask him if he's going to retire or if he's considering it, but it's surely going to come up again. Everyone's going to talk about it now going forward, and I'm not going to say if he should or shouldn't. I could say something, what I think, but ultimately, I think you don't really know a good answer to that unless you've actually played football, for a couple reasons that I will touch on a little bit. But it's certainly going to be a very serious conversation to have now, because this is his third concussion now, and it almost gets to a point where you're very fortunate enough with how delicate everything is with the brain and the trauma and some long-term injuries football players can sustain. It comes to a point, I just thought of it before, of how you can reach a point to how many times can you dodge the bullet until it ultimately ends up hitting you, right? He's become very fortunate to have this happen to him a couple times. He's been able to come back each time, but I'm sure there comes a point where you're thinking, all right, this is the third or fourth time now. What's the next hit potentially going to be like? What's going to happen if I do get hit next time, potentially even harder? Because the hit that he had on Damar Hamlin, it's almost like Tua hit him with his head, the way that he dove at him. And this time, he was able to get up and walk away, right? He didn't look that hurt, but it was a concussion. And now you start thinking, if you're Tua, I'm assuming, is that what's the next hit going to be like, right? What if next time somebody actually does slam him down like before, or somebody just runs into his head trying to tackle him or something like that? No one's thinking about protecting Tua when they're trying to go tackle him. Sometimes a big hit just happens, and he was able to walk away this time, but you kind of have to think how fortunate and how lucky you are, and if you're going to continue to be like that going forward. And then if you're thinking like that also, I don't think that's the way to play the game, honestly. No one's thinking twice, second guessing on how to hit this guy a little bit easier. Everyone's just going off of instinct. The game is so fast and so violent that you can't control those things, so you kind of have to think back and regroup and kind of put that into consideration as well. And again, the scariest part for me was that hit wasn't that bad. So the next time he gets slammed or something like that, or just run into somebody, he's on the ground or something, and somebody tramples over him, something like that, you can never plan for stuff like that. So that's really what worries me. And talking about retirement and things like this, for everyone, to give their opinion, it's hard. It's hard, like I said before, because this is pretty much everything for these players. And Tua's only 26 years old, right? He'll be allowed to play again. I'm sure he's going to pass all the protocols, however long that may take. But at some point, it becomes, should he come back, not whether or not he is able to come back, because he's going to be able to come back. But the question of should be, talked about with his family. And it's hard, again, because you don't really know unless you're playing football at this level, especially because this is pretty much, I don't really know how long he's been playing, has been his life for forever, for all of his life pretty much, how much his family's invested in it, even still to this day. This is his daily like dopamine intake, right? This is the why for him. This is why he gets up, why he sort of has a purpose in life. The bonds that he's built with, we heard before when he was talking about Brian Flores and now Mike McDaniel, that relationship, those bonds, to just walk away from it is extremely tough. The debt he might feel to the Miami Dolphins for trying to repay them, trying to show his gratitude towards them for giving him this generational type of contract for him to just retire afterwards. I'm sure it's tough to juggle all of that, and I'm not saying he shouldn't just because of the money, but it's something that I think a lot of people can't really answer without being in that position, especially at 26 years old. If you just close the chapter right there, you still feel like you have so much more to give, and it feels almost unfair in a way that you feel like you could go, but again, in the same time, your body or something else is telling you you can't. So to say that he should or shouldn't retire, that's going to be up to him. He should do what he feels is best for him. I'm sure his family's going to have a lot to say about it. But for now, I'm sure the Dolphins should probably place him on IR, give him at least those 4 weeks to not be close to the team, not be thinking about football or anything like that. And then after that, we'll see where we are. But definitely a scary moment. With Tua happening again, with, this being a critical time, still so early on. It's not like the Dolphins could just throw in the season, but still, on the field stuff is probably the last thing on everyone's mind, and hopefully Tua does get better from this. I know he's going to get better, but hopefully he makes the decision that is sitting well with everyone, that he feels confident in making, and also just, can feel at peace with ultimately. Because it is extremely tough. We'll be keeping touch on how everything goes, but that was certainly the biggest piece of news from last night's game. But we can't have this show, obviously. Moving on now to the reaction to that show. We're going to go to a break right now, and then once we come back, we're going to talk about reviewing everything that we saw yesterday on the field, how the Bills looked, a little bit about the Dolphins, and that sort of thing coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to dive more onto what happened on the field between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. The Bills making a big statement last night with a 31-10 victory from start to finish. Basically, it looked like the Bills were in complete control. They knew exactly they almost knew like exactly how this game was going to go. They looked pretty much in control the entire game and barely broke a sweat, honestly, or looked worried, like I said. The most concerned I saw out of the Buffalo Bills was when they were trying to convert that fourth down early in the game, and they ended up scoring on that. I think it was the first touchdown actually in the game. That was as far as I saw their concern go with this game. And then from that point on, yeah, the Dolphins were able to come back a little bit, tie it up, keep it close. But there was a lot of factors in this game that kind of extended this lead and really made it evident that the Bills are reaching a point of being considered, legit this season. I'm not going to go that far yet. I'll explain why in a little bit. But, coming off of that Arizona game where Josh Allen had to be Superman basically and score 4 touchdowns or be involved in 4 touchdowns on his own, he didn't really have to do too much last night. You look at his stat line, 13 for 19 for 139 yards and 1 touchdown. It was mostly the James Cook show on 11 carries, 78 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 1 receiving one as well on that 4th down, like I said. And everything the Bills did, it just seemed so efficient, so quick to score because of their defensive performance as well. They had 3 interceptions off of Tua. The first one being on the first drive, pretty much setting the tone of how this game was gonna go. But even though off of that, after I saw that interception, you might look at it and it bounced basically off of the guy's arm. He just wasn't ready for the ball. I didn't mind that interception. I saw it. I'm like, dang, that was not good. But I didn't lose any confidence in the Dolphins because it was just kind of like a freak interception. Even though the Bills, didn't really do too much. They might have gotten a field goal out of that. The Dolphins were able to come back, I'm pretty sure tied up at 7-7, and then it was still relatively close, but as we went on, the Bills found themselves more in a groove, scoring, the Dolphins still trying to keep pace. Then you saw an interception it was supposed to go to Robbie Chosen, the new wide receiver for them, but not on the same page just yet with Tua. It kind of sailed over his head as well, and that's another interception, so now you're thinking all right, that was bad, but we gotta keep it together here to at least make this a little bit close. And then the score was pretty extended, or the deficit was pretty extended at halftime. And then you come back hoping to see a little bit more. The Bills got the ball, but they went 3 and out. And then the Dolphins come out, and the 3rd interception was just pretty bad to say, or to be honest. Tua getting pressured. He tries to throw it out of bounds, but just doesn't put enough power on it. And it just floats right over to the sideline and falls right in the hands of Ingram, the Bills' defensive back, and they score a pick 6 off of that. And it's man, what are they doing? What is this offense doing? A lot of the times I didn't really like the play calling for the Miami Dolphins either. I felt like they ran a little pitch run / handoff to each side 5 times in a row per drive or something like that. It was very odd that they just kept going back and back and back to that same play. And it was weird, again, also because they were losing. So to keep trying to insist on running the ball like that, I get it that you don't want to abandon it. And that's something that teams do too quickly. But you're down at this point probably almost 3 scores, if not more. I don't understand the play calling there. I know probably Jalen and Tyreek weren't having the best game, but I was a bit puzzled by that, and I have to give the Bills defense a lot of credit because even though they only got 2 sacks, they got a lot of pressure on Tua, and he could have taken at least 3 more potentially, but they only ended up with 2 sacks. They were having their way basically with the offensive line of the Miami Dolphins. They got banged up a lot. You saw Armstead go out and get hurt. There was a couple more offensive linemen that got hurt as well and got banged up in this game, and it just went on. I was very impressed also, not only with the secondary of the Bills, but their linebacker, Dorian Williams. He was everywhere. He led the team in total tackles, I want to say. He was sniffing out all of their run plays as well, so I feel like he really made it his mission, his assignment, and just his purpose out there in that game to wreck all these running plays the Dolphins tried to establish. So I was very impressed with him. And again, Waddle and Tyreek Hill were non-evident, at least to their level, like they usually are, because together, both of them, they finished with 7 receptions for 65 yards combined, and that looks like an all right stat line. for one of these guys, right? That's how high you hold these wide receivers. And for that to be a combined stat line, just showed the overall picture and the dominance of the Bills defense overall. And that's the biggest takeaway, right? Right? Because as far as their offense and still being efficient, explosive even without Stephon Diggs, I felt like their defense really showed out in this game. There was a lot, even through all the injuries, to Matt Milano, Teron Johnson didn't play in this game. Also, the new just wave of secondary players that they have in the backfield. No more Jordan Poyer, no more Micah Hyde, no more Tre'Davious White. All those guys are gone, but their secondary played great. Rasul Douglas played pretty well. You look at their linebackers. I mentioned Dorian Williams, Terrell Bernard, I want to say is his first name, if I'm not mistaken. He got injured in this game. He didn't finish the game out. And, even still, their defense was very dominant overall. And on the offensive side of the ball, not only did they execute and were very well coached and came in with a very good game plan, the way that they were able to execute everything and execute this identity and really apply it to the Miami Dolphins was very off-putting, because like I said in the preview to this game, I felt like the score was going to be the other way around. I predicted 30-20 in favor of Miami, and the Bills won 31-10, even more dominant than I predicted the other way around. So their offense really also was the catalyst of everything. They might not have one big superstar anymore like Stephon Diggs, but it's a committee approach. They run the ball relentlessly with James Cook, obviously. Ray Davis got in there a little bit, and he played pretty well. And they're going to stick to it. They're going to stick, and they're going to stay committed to this heavy personnel, running the ball a lot sort of approach that has worked for them in these first two games. And not to say that I wasn't expecting that from them. Well, I wasn't. But to work at this level and to look this good, putting up 34 points and then 31 points in the Week 2 game, it's very, very surprising, I will say. They were able to use play action a lot. Allen's ability to just run, throw the ball, make any sort of throw as well. It's a tremendous help overall for this Bills team. They looked unstoppable behind Josh Allen, and really a lot of credit goes to their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, as well, because I'm sure there was a bit of a questioning period, some doubt, some hesitation when you do switch to this offense last year. You don't feature Stephon Diggs too much. There's some scrutiny, there's some potential criticism to still stick with it, and now coming out of the other end, looking like this genius now, having the Bills play to this level. A lot of credit goes out to him as well. So the Bills doing a good job on both sides of the ball, even through all their struggles and potential hurdles that could have really affected them. They just keep trudging on. But all of that being said, I'm going to hold off a little bit on saying that, they're for real, like they're real contenders in the AFC, because they held the Dolphins down, and I'm not sure if that's just a Dolphins and Bills thing, with the dominance that Josh has shown against the Bills. Same thing with Sean McDermott, and just how this matchup has gone over the last few years. I'm going to reserve my feeling on the Bills until next week, because the Cardinals could have seriously won that game, and the Bills would be 1-1 with a good win, but also a very ugly loss at home to the Arizona Cardinals. They were able to put up 28 points on them, and if they had a little bit better defense or just some more steam on offense, they could have won that game. So I've seen some doubts in this team that I'm not just yet able to put my full belief in this team like I am with the Texans or the Chiefs or even the Ravens as well. I'm not quite there yet, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm very impressed with them. They're proving me wrong, because I had them finish as the third team in the AFC East. So we'll see where they go from here. Part of me thinks that, again, this is sort of a Miami and Bills thing, but you can't take away from just how impressive they looked and looking so dominant on it. The Bills should be probably the favorites going forward, just based off of 2 weeks in that division. They should be the favorite in that division to at least win it, or to be a serious contender to take it, because before I had the Dolphins and the Jets. My mistake. Now, I'm sure if we don't see a dominant performance from the Jets, the Bills are going to have 2 weeks where offensively they looked very, very good, very efficient, very just dominant. I keep using the word dominant because that's what they were. So we'll see what the Jets do. But for right now, the Bills are looking like still the team to beat in that division, which, again, I wasn't expecting. But good for the Bills, good for Josh Allen. He continues his push for MVP. I think he's making it more and more evident of how this award has been escaping him, and I'm sure he's going to turn a lot of heads this year if he keeps leading this team to a lot of wins this year, as it looks like he will be based off of these performances. But that is all on the game last night. We talked about Tua, we talked about the game. Now we look forward to Sunday. We did the first half of the game picks yesterday on the show. Now we're going to get to the second part of that and pick the rest of the winners for the second half of the games on Sunday. I'm going to go through everything, give my reasons why, and make the picks ultimately. So that is coming up right after this break. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back here on the show, the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, to bring you guys my second part of picking all the winners and ultimately the losers of this week. We went through the 1 through 7 games yesterday. We didn't have enough time to go through all of it, obviously, so I decided to split it up into 2 parts. Now getting into the second half today, there's a couple games that are definitely noteworthy, and there are some pretty good ones in here, continuing on from last week and how there were a couple great games last week, and now we have the pleasure of picking some of these winners again. And 7 games here again to pick from. We're going to exclude the Monday night game because I could just do that on Monday, obviously next week. So starting on the Seahawks traveling to New England. The Seahawks are actually favored in this game on the road, but not by that much. And you look at New England, both of these teams coming in 1-0. New England, definitely an upset last week. I don't think a lot of people expected, or really nobody expected them to win that game, but it's great for them. They already have a win. They're 1-0 in so early this year. And it was in large part because of their great defense, great running game against Cincinnati, and including the Seahawks now into this conversation. Both teams' defenses played very well in week 1. The Seahawks did a good job of ultimately shutting the door on Bo Nix, intercepting him twice, creating a lot of uncomfortable situations for him as well, at least throwing the ball. So both defense come into this riding a little bit of momentum. Both quarterbacks are very similar in this game because they're experienced guys that have been around a couple organizations, and it doesn't feel, not to their discredit or anything, but it doesn't feel like they're the future of these organizations, obviously. So they're very, very reliable veterans in this position in Geno Smith and Jacoby Brissett that they're good enough to, win you some games or at least keep you in them, but also they're not going to lose you the game. So that's what makes this pick so fascinating to me. You have great weapons on the side of the Seahawks on both ends. Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, Leonard as well on the defensive line. Then DK Metcalf, Kenneth Walker had a big game. And then for the Patriots, it might not stand out too much, but they had good performances from Ramondre Stevenson. He doesn't get enough credit. And just their game plan overall. That's what I think could make the difference in this game. You have two new head coaches as well, very defensive-minded in this game with Mike Macdonald and Gerard Mayo. But in terms of my pick, I think... you know what's funny? I had the Seahawks down. On this paper because I like their offense more right now. And Kenneth Walker and Tyler Lockett may be out, so I could change my pick. I'm looking at it now. I don't want to change and backtrack on it, but I feel like one of them or both of them could not play in this game, so I'm going to switch it and go to New England. I think they're going to have another great defensive game. Christian Gonzalez, another guy that didn't get talked about enough in his coverage of Jamar Chase. I feel like he's going to do the same to DK, and then at that point, playing a better defense, in my opinion, than Denver. I think Geno could struggle a little bit, especially if Kenneth Walker is not playing. Give me New England to go to 2-0 this season. To join the Bills at the top of that division is something nobody was expecting, but I like the Patriots in this one now. And then the second game, we have the Saints going to Dallas to play the Cowboys, obviously, in their home debut. I'd say that Dallas rose to the challenge last week, genuinely. They played a great game on both sides of the ball, on all three facets, actually, because they had a punt return as well. Whereas the Saints played a bad team that I think made them look a little bit better. Like, I feel like a lot of teams that play the Panthers will. No offense to the Panthers, but it is the reality. The Saints are an okay team, but I think against Dallas, I was more impressed with them going to Cleveland, beating a good defense, than I was the Saints playing the Panthers, right? A shout out to Cowboys linebacker DeMarvion Overshown. I want to get the name right. DeMarvion Overshown, because he's a second-year linebacker now coming in, starting for the Dallas Cowboys defense. I had no idea who he was, but in that game against the Browns, he recorded 11 tackles, a sack, and was flying around all over the place. You know, he really put his name out there. Number 13, if you want to keep an eye on him this game. Very impressed with him. Eric Kendricks played very well, both of those guys in the middle of the field. And obviously, DeMarcus Lawrence looked good. Michael Parsons did his thing. Trayvon Diggs looked pretty well on top of that. So, I'm very surprised with some of these guys in some spots where I wasn't expecting them to have necessarily playmakers, but DeMarvion Overshown, definitely a guy to keep an eye on, and he impressed me a lot in that game after I went back and looked at, like, who the heck was this linebacker that I missed. But I don't think the Saints just have enough playmakers to keep pace with the Cowboys overall. And I think Dallas wins in this game similarly to how they won in Cleveland. And then we move on to the Giants traveling to the nation's capital, playing the Washington Commanders. A matchup of former LSU teammates just from last year. Malik Neighbors on one side, Jaden Daniels on the other. I'm sure it was funny when they had their little wager going on and the NFL kind of told them not to, and kind of slapped them on the wrist and made them go to these classes about the dangers of wagering and betting and things like that. If you guys haven't seen it, it was prominent a couple weeks ago when I saw it, and I thought it was pretty funny how that all played out. But now they get a chance to square off against each other early on in the year, and I'm leaning towards the Commanders just because they put up 20 points in a loss, largely because of Jaden Daniels, and I think that just put a spotlight on how special Jaden Daniels is, more so than I am still worried about the Commanders and their lack of weapons. I think they could do a better job of getting Terry McLaurin the ball. He only finished with 2 receptions in that game against the Bucs. It was a tough one on the road, but now they're back at home. They're going to have everybody excited, more excited than they have been in the last 10 years or something, with Jaden Daniels having a very promising quarterback on their team now, and I feel like he's gonna really show us what he's made of in this game. The Giants looked like a mess on offense last week at home, and now the Washington defense didn't, look great either, but it could be a reason for this game to be a little bit closer. The Washington defense, maybe not one of the better ones, definitely not. And the Giants offense, where it is right now, I don't think anybody can say that they're too confident in it. So this game could be pretty close overall. I feel like Jaden Daniels and how special he is. I like Dan Quinn. I like Cliff Kingsbury. I feel like we're going to see the full package this week. Give me the Commanders in this one to send the Giants to 0-2. Then, talking about the Commanders playing the Buccaneers last week, now the Buccaneers will travel to Detroit in a playoff rematch from the I want to say the wild card round or the divisional round, the divisional round last year in the playoffs. A close game towards the end of it. The Buccaneers defense kind of showed up late, but now it's the offense that kind of has picked it up a little bit, and the Buccaneers offense is riding into this game a little bit more dangerous, threatening, I would say. They just came off of a 30-point win, putting up 37 points on the Washington Commanders. A great showing also from their new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, and it's a good test for Detroit, I think, after playing the Rams, but Puka getting hurt, their offensive line getting hurt and everything. Now they're going up against Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan looked great, Rashad White, also Baker looking fantastic as well. It's another good offense to test this Detroit defense as well. For this young secondary also with Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold as well, a first-year player. I'm interested by that matchup. You know, you look at last week how Stafford threw for over 300 yards. Cooper Kupp had 110 yards as well. Now you kind of think of what this offense for the Bucs could do to that defense, and it could be closer, I think, than a lot of people believe. No Antoine Winfield for the Bucs defense, which is going to be huge with how relentless and mean the Lions are. To have that guy missing is certainly going to be a loss. I need to see pressure on Jared Goff. I didn't really see that too much, and I feel like that's going to be the difference in this game, how good the offensive line is for the Lions. I think the Lions win another one. I believe they will in another close game in this one. Then the Rams play the Arizona Cardinals. Injuries for the Los Angeles Rams could make this game a little scary, because they're so depleted everywhere on offense. Their offensive line's banged up. No Puka Nacua, so who's going to step up? Instead of him, the Arizona defense isn't great. You know, they gave up that big lead that they had to the Buffalo Bills, but now they're a little bit at home, so it could be a bit of a boost now. You learned so much in the first week. Hopefully they're able to apply it in this game. The Rams defense also looked good. They look solid against the Lions and how good offensively they are with a lot of their young players. So that's reassuring. And with that in mind, the Arizona offense also looked good on the road without basically Marvin Harrison Jr. So that matchup is going to be interesting, right? The Cardinals offense trying to get going and the Rams trying to build momentum off of last week where they didn't win, but I think their defense played better than a lot of people will give them credit for. And that's why I'm going to go and trust the Rams in this game. I'm going to trust Sean McVay to come up with some genius plan to escape with a win here. It could be close again because Arizona could be a bit threatening now with more of an offensive firepower. Then the last two games to close it out. Cincinnati at the Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of talk from the Cincinnati players. I won't go into it just yet. That's the next segment I wanted to talk about. But just where Kansas City is right now compared to what I saw from the Bengals, offensively and defensively especially. There's not going to be Marquise Brown in this game. He's unfortunately going on IR. But fortunately for the Chiefs, you know, Travis Kelce didn't really have an effect on last week's game. The running game was there, but it was mostly the Xavier Worthy coming out party to kind of make his presence known in the NFL. So that's a great thing. I feel like the Chiefs they look like they're weeks ahead of where the Bengals are. And I know the Bengals always start off bad, but it doesn't mean that it's good that they always start off bad. So give me the Chiefs in Arrowhead to take this one. And then the last one, Sunday Night Football, the Bears traveling to Houston. Potentially no Roma Dunze in this one. Keenan Allen didn't practice that much this week, but he could be able to suit up in that game, so that's good for them. Caleb Williams looking to try and bounce back after a shaky performance last week where they won, but he didn't score. The offense didn't score an offensive touchdown. So yeah, you want to kind of have a bounce back game, but it could be tough with Smith missing guys like Rome Odunze, maybe Keenan Allen. So it gives me a bit of hesitation to really be confident in them. Houston, they're the Texans. It's weird to say they're the Texans. Tank Dell, Nico, Stephon Diggs look great. CJ looked a little bit like he was missing a step, but I think that's just going to be all erased at home now in week 2. And they discovered a running game, right? They have a capable running back in Joe Mixon that's going to make this team look extraordinary. Now to spread everybody out with these weapons, Dalton Schultz in there as well, and just creating more space for Joe Mixon. He just put up 159 yards on the Colts. It was a close game, but I like all the different ways that the Texans can attack you. I think it's going to be too much for the Bears. The Texans will win this game and move to 2-0. And that's pretty much all the games from yesterday's episode to today's. Let me know what you guys think of my picks and leave your guys' thoughts on anything I said or giving me your guys' picks as well. But that'll do it for that segment. We're going to move on to the next segment of the show. I kind of hinted at it during the preview there. We're going to talk about the Bengals and Chiefs game. A lot of smack talk coming from the Cincinnati Bengals players. Very interesting comments from Jamar Chase and their defensive back, Cam Taylor-Britt. We're going to get into what they said and just diving a little bit more on this Bengals team and whether or not they can turn the corner like they usually do. That is coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here to jump right back into the action on the show. We're going to highlight a little bit here of this matchup between arguably the biggest matchup of this week's slate of Week 2 games. We're going to look at the Bengals traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Cincinnati Bengals. This game is going to be great. I feel like it always is, or it's usually great because of the play on the field, right? You see so many good players like in recent games, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, they're obviously still there. Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, Kelsey, Mahomes, Pacheco, all those guys, we've been treated to seeing them go up against each other. But now, it's certainly different for both teams, but in opposite ways, right? Kansas City got even better than they did last year, and they won the Super Bowl. Better at wide receiver, certainly. We're not going to see Marquise Brown for a while, but even still, Xavier Worthy, from how he debuted in the game last week against the Ravens. A lot to look forward to this team. A lot of excitement around the Chiefs and their wide receivers. But on the other end, Cincinnati also had a lot of changing, a lot of rummaging, a lot of shifting through their players. But they didn't necessarily add a lot of pieces. They got rid of a lot. Tyler Boyd moved on. He's in Tennessee. T. Higgins is still there, but we're not going to see him in this game. Joe Mixon is now in Houston, and Cincinnati looks like it's still in preseason mode, basically, from how they played against the New England Patriots. I know it is a trend now. It's kind of like this running joke almost that the Bengals, they stink in the first couple of games. They're awful. Their records 1-12 or something like that in the first 2 weeks. And people take it so lightly. And I know they're notoriously bad to start the year. They don't jump off at anything, but it doesn't necessarily make it like a good thing, right? Yeah, it's kind of funny that they start off 0-2 or just looking very bad, and then in recent years, they've been able to overcome that. But again, it doesn't make it a good thing to start 0-2, right? I think that's what I feel like everyone's overlooking. It's crazy that they do that, but why not try to avoid doing that? I don't know. It's kind of weird how everyone sort of approaches it, but now this is kind of starting to become a rivalry a little bit, and that's why it is so interesting to talk about it, because of how these teams have changed, how the Bengals are coming into this game on their usual bad note, whereas the Chiefs, I think, I was kind of expecting them to win last week, but I didn't expect them to look that good. They look like they're playing in late November or December the way that they started, and now it kind of, to me, puts them at such a bigger advantage over the Bengals compared to their last meetings, but that still didn't deject Jamar Chase and Cam Taylor-Britt, their defensive back, from speaking about this matchup and saying some very funny, starting this trash talk already between these two teams. Both teams have made it pretty clear that they don't like each other, and that's great for rivalries, but I feel like it reaches the limit a little bit when you're trying to talk trash. And you guys will see it here in this quote. Jamar Chase started everything off by saying, everybody knows that, bro. It's not if. We are the team to beat in the AFC, and we know it, and we got to act like it, and we got to play like it too. That was the main quote that everybody was picking off from. And with that, I love the confidence, right? I love the short-term memory. You're the best team. You're the best player in the world. I love the confidence. If you are good enough to back it up, it's all good. And Jamar Chase is certainly great, phenomenal of backing anything he says up. He can say he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. He'll say it. He'll tell anybody that. A lot of people believe it. I think he's very good. He's up there, certainly top 2, top 3 for sure. And that's great. I love, when good players can back it up, because nobody wants to hear anybody trash talk if they can't back it up. They just look silly. But Jamar Chase certainly has the capabilities of showing you, he's already shown everyone how good he is, among the best wide receivers in the NFL. But it's not an individual thing, right? It's not like a Chiefs player called out Jamar or something like that, or somebody else brought up the fact that Jamar didn't look good in the first game or something like that. It's not like he's speaking solely for himself. He said that they're the team to beat in the AFC, and I'm not naive to the fact that NFL teams, players are not just gonna give in to saying like, oh, the Chiefs are way better than us, like hopefully we can win that game. No one's gonna say that, obviously, right? That's too extreme. This could be sort of a motivation kind of thing to motivate his teammates, like, we can beat anybody. We just took a hard loss, but let's go. Let's keep it up. Let's go into Kansas City and beat this team. We're still the team to beat, right? He's saying that, trying to instill some more confidence in his team. The rivalry also, if you really don't like the other team, you're not going to give in to saying that they're better. Jamar Chase has made that pretty evident, that he's not going to, go down to saying, Patrick's name or mentioning Patrick as the GOAT or anything. That's the rivalry bit of it, and it's all fun and games, right? But at what point is it okay to just maybe kind of tone it down a little bit, right? Not only this, because this is coming off of the back of different times that the Bengals have just chirped a little bit at the Chiefs, and it hasn't really gone their way. The biggest one, obviously, being Burrowhead, Mike Hilton mentioning that, and just poking fun at the fact that, the Bengals have gone into Arrowhead and beaten them, and that they're uber confident about it, and then they don't win. They haven't won, I think, since those playoff games, and that was one of the biggest ones. Also you have Jamar Chase, like I said before, kind of pretending to not know Patrick or just refusing to say his name. If you guys remember, in an interview, someone mentioned Patrick Mahomes, and Jamar Chase said, who? Who is that? Patrick? And then that was pretty funny. It's going back to the rivalry. And then Patrick obviously wins the Super Bowl. He posts a picture of himself with his 2 Super Bowl rings. And in the caption, all it says was, that's who, right? Calling back to what Jamar Chase said. Also, on the NFL Top 100, Jamar just refusing to say Patrick is the GOAT or the best player in the league. He kind of gave him his flowers, but just like Voldemort said, he who shall not be named. It's kind of funny how it just keeps going on with Jamar and the Bengals. But, at what point do we just keep talking about it like the Bengals just came off of a big win and the media is still doubting the Bengals? It's not that situation at all. we have serious reason to believe that the Bengals are not close to or are not showing any signs of the team that they can be at this point in the year. And I'll get to that a little bit more, but also it didn't end with Jamar Chase. Their defensive back, like I mentioned before, Cam Taylor-Britt, was also asked specifically about Xavier Worthy and what sort of attributes, abilities he brings to this Chiefs offense. And Cam Taylor-Britt said, speed. That's about it. He can run straight, run jet sweeps, and just run straight. He can't do too much else, so that's about it. It's kind of funny. Again, it is funny how just like blunt everything is. The trash talk, I love the competitiveness, especially for corners, right? This is the kind of thing you expect. Wide receivers as well. They're going to trash talk. They're going to give it to you. This sort of just I don't want to say unrealistic, but just for a lack of a better term, this unrealistic confidence, unwavering, unbothered confidence that they always have. But still, I feel like it loses some of its punch when you get upset in week one, right? The upset from the New England Patriots beating you in your home stadium, and still to kind of degrade Xavier Worthy and say that, all he brings is speed, like we're going to clamp him up or something like that, or we're not worried about him. Maybe they should be worried about him because their offense only scored 10 points and their defense only gave up 16, but they still lost that game, and the Chiefs are coming off of a great offensive showing against Baltimore, who was in the AFC Championship game last year. Maybe they should be a little bit more worried of how this entire offense can potentially beat them. I have them winning that game, like I obviously said in the last segment, but even with a loss, people will still believe in Cincinnati. I feel like they're going to lose this game, and people will still believe in Cincinnati. I probably would still. I'm not going to ride them off after 0-2, like I kind of alluded to the fact before. It is like this running joke, like I said, but I'm not going to... Joe and Jamar, you can't deny, are so special and so elite that they're going to beat bad teams along the way and have enough a bunch of times to, win some close games. But still, I'm worried that the expectations for this team with Joe Burrow and everyone always saying that when he's healthy, they make it to the AFC Championship game. I feel like those expectations don't line up anymore with the personnel that they have. And that's pretty worrying to me because Burrow is healthy. With Chase, like I said, is still elite. But T. Higgins is not going to play in this game again. So I don't know why I'd expect any sort of different result from this game, from the offensive side of the ball. Again, because Jamar Chase will be more prepared, so that's good. After missing a lot of training camp, he's going to look a little bit better, I'm sure, after some more weeks of practice, kind of getting more in the rhythm of everything. But still no T. Higgins, still Ioshavas out there, Hawkins out there as the other pass catchers for the Bengals. So still no running game. And I don't understand why, going up against a better team, why I would believe that the Bengals are somehow going to have a different result. If anything, it's going to be more of a blowout, I believe, in my opinion. But also, I think just losing Joe Mixon is so overlooked and so huge for this team. The lack of a running game makes them so one-dimensional. And if Chase Brown and Zach Moss can't give you anything more than they did in the first week, you're really in trouble, I believe, because if you are a one-dimensional team, and that's still like pretty decent if you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? It's not totally awful, but not having T. Higgins to kind of back them up, Joe Mixon, like I said before, Tyler Boyd also gone, on top of facing a great defense that isn't scared of your running game whatsoever, it won't lead to many wins because no one's afraid of you running the ball. And if you do run it, they don't feel like you're not going to gash them or anything. So, no T. Higgins. Everyone, they're going to have Trent McDuffie on Jamar Chase most of the game, I'm assuming. If at any point, Jamar Chase starts to get going, let's go put another guy on him or two guys on him. Then it forces everybody else to beat you, and I'm not sure these other receivers are capable of doing that, not to the extent of trying to keep pace with Patrick Mahomes, Travis, Xavier Worthy, Isaiah Pacheco, and all these guys. It's not going to work in these games, especially too if your run defense is getting gashed like it did last week in at home against the New England Patriots. It's not a good recipe if you're predictable on offense and your defense isn't top 5 to limit opposing teams to like 10 or 15 points or something like that. I feel like the game planning has to evolve to fit this new group that they have in Cincinnati, to kind of scheme them open, throw different formations, motions, shifts, everything to try and at least create an illusion or a diversion or something like that, to not make it so easy to predict when Joe's going to pass the ball and when they're going to run the ball. And when they do run the ball, we're not worried about it. So, the inability to kind of realize this and make changes, I think, has me seriously worrying and doubting, that they're just going to be the same old Bengals going back to before, right? Starting 0-2 potentially, everybody feels like they're just going to click it, but they don't have the same players to just fix it randomly and kind of get this offense going. That's the biggest difference for me. The biggest issue also, losing Joe Mixon is going to be huge for them. And how they fix it, how they change the game plan, I hope to see it at some point in this game. But that's my level of worry with the Bengals. And their trash talking, I'm sure, is not going to do them any favors as well. As if the Chiefs needed any reason more to be motivated. Don't poke the bear. Don't do it against Patrick. Don't go out there and give him any more reason to believe that he has to bury you or anything like that. You shouldn't have done it to Tom. Nobody should have done it to Tom. Now his predecessor, or no, not his predecessor, just the next guy up in the GOAT conversation, don't do the same thing, right? Don't give them this bulletin board material. That's where I think they messed up here, and I don't think it's going to be good for them on Sunday. So that's that, but we do have one more segment to get to. Just a quick injury update on some of the biggest names. T. Higgins I mentioned, also Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, and Myles Garrett as well, before we get into the weekend of football. So we'll be right back with that last update on the show. Thank you for joining me here back on the show for the last segment to just give you guys a last-minute injury update in case you need to make any fantasy changes or anything like that, or just if you are unaware of it for any of your favorite teams leading into this week of football. I think the biggest piece of news, there was a couple from this morning and also just recently that I saw. Christian McCaffrey will not be playing against the Minnesota Vikings this week. The 49ers decided to hold him off again after going through practice at a limited capacity. They decided not to play him, which I think is the right decision, honestly. There's no reason to rush him back right now, especially how Jordan Mason looked, like I mentioned, at some point this week. It makes no sense to just feel the need to want to bring Christian McCaffrey back, right? They're going to hold off on it, but the interesting part about that is that the reports that I did see saying that Christian McCaffrey was not going to play also mentioned how Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers are now open to the fact that they could use Christian McCaffrey and could use him and put him potentially on the injured reserve going forward, which would be pretty surprising, just because they've kind of played it up to be like they're just going to take it day by day, week by week, and it shouldn't be too bad. But now, like I kind of alluded to the fact before with the tendonitis to the Achilles and kind of a very delicate situation with that, Christian being such a workhorse just off of the back of last year and dealing with that as a runner of the football. Obviously, a lot of stress on your legs and the joints and ligaments and everything. To kind of have Achilles tendonitis and potentially lingering all year with the possibility of making your Achilles more vulnerable to a tear, it makes no sense to bring him back now. Now to put him on IR, it makes you think that this could be a little bit worse than initially thought of, so that's concerning. But if they do put him on IR, it's going to stink for a lot of fantasy owners already, but I wouldn't be mad at it just because, again, the 49ers look so dominant from an actual football perspective with Jordan Mason, just overall how dominant they are. If they get him back by like week 8 or something and he's a lot better, that's going to be the best for their football team. They're certainly going to get by without him. So that's the biggest piece of news more recently. Then this morning, I kind of talked about it a little bit before. It was that this morning the Chiefs placed Hollywood Brown on the IR, relating to the Christian McCaffrey news a little bit there. It will mean that Marquise Brown will miss at least the next 4 weeks because of the injured reserve rule, right? If you're officially placed on there, you have to miss 4 weeks of the NFL season. Now Marquise Brown will undergo surgery to repair that dislocated SC joint in his shoulder. NFL insider Jordan Schultz mentioned while he was reporting on it that even though Marquise Brown felt better about that shoulder, his shoulder was still not healing the right way according to the reports. So without surgery, there was still a risk of a more serious injury happening to the wide receiver for the Chiefs. So it was decided that a surgery would be the best option for them going forward, and also that it is a blow for them, obviously, that he's not going to be there. You're going to have to wait even longer to see him in regular season football with all the anticipation around them. But to me, it makes the addition, the drafting of Xavier Worthy that much better to soften the blow a little bit, to kind of develop him more, have him have a bigger role in this offense. And then once Marquise Brown comes back with Rashee Rice, they're going to be a well-oiled machine, even more than they are right now, it seems like. So it's definitely unfortunate. I was looking forward to seeing Marquise Brown, but if this is the best thing for him to be the healthiest, I think no one could really be too upset, because similarly to the 49ers, the Chiefs are not, going to drop their next like 6 games. They're going to do just fine without him. So that is that. Then the next piece of news, T. Higgins didn't practice again today because of that hamstring injury that kept him out of week 1. It's very likely now that he's going to miss this next game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's interesting, too, because they asked T. Higgins about this injury, and the idea that has been brought up to him was that some fans actually have this thought, this sort of conspiracy that T. Higgins is, sort of faking this injury, still connected to the fact that he didn't get a contract extension. Now he's just milking the season, milking this injury away to kind of get by, to just leave them ultimately, it looks like. But he's denied that, obviously, with the fact that the deadline has passed to give an extension to a franchise tag player. So if you knew that fact, it makes sense that he's not faking it, because he can't get an extension anyway. So there's no real reason to do that. So the Cincinnati Bengals will have to roll out with Jamar Chase, Andre Yoshivas, and Irwin as their top targets in that game. It doesn't make me any more confident in this offense. If T. Higgins was even playing, that they could potentially beat the Chiefs at home. I expect them, I will say this, I will expect them to look a little bit cleaner, a little bit more explosive, because I don't think Jamar Chase caught a pass over 10 to 15 yards until the fourth quarter or something crazy like that. So I'll expect the Bengals to look a bit more threatening, a bit more tidy, clean, with some of their plays, progressions, and things like that. But it doesn't make me confident that they're going to go toe-to-toe with this Chiefs offense now. I still see them at a deficit, and this is just another blow to their chances, in my opinion. Then moving on to the Chicago Bears, Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze missed practice yesterday as well as today, and it's looking like Rome Odunze is the one that's probably not going to play, if I'm going to guess. Head coach Matt Eberflus said that the real concern out of all these injuries, mainly Keenan and Rome, is that Rome is the real concern for him and the coaching staff. They're not really too concerned about Keenan Allen as much, so we could see Keenan Allen out there. He's a veteran. He doesn't necessarily need the practices, if you will. He is joining a new team, so that's that, but I feel like he's still, going to contribute a lot if he plays. It's certainly going to be better for them if he's out there rather than not. So that's a bit more encouraging. Keenan Allen missed practice with a sore heel, sort of a precautionary thing, according to reports. So again, more optimism around him to play. Rome Odunze had a more severe MCL sprain than obviously a heel soreness situation with Keenan Allen. So it is a little bit concerning with MCLs and ligaments and things like that. So I wouldn't expect Rome to play in this game. Keenan Allen, different story. If he feels a little bit better on Sunday, Saturday, I wouldn't be surprised to see him out there as well. Because the Chicago Bears will definitely need him, right? They need to see Caleb play better, especially after last week's game. But going up against the Texans, no Rome, hopefully Keenan Allen's out there. It's going to be a little bit tricky for them to win that game. Then, just recently, off of last night, I mentioned Terrell Bernard. He avoided major injury, apparently, last night as he was diagnosed with only a pectoral strain rather than a full pectoral tear. Because a full tear requires surgery, he was going to be out most of the year, like it happened to Matt Milano, actually. I'm sure he tore his pec, if I remember correctly, so he's going to be out until at least December. And they dodged the bullet here with Terrell Bernard, because he stepped up as almost the leader of this team, and now he's still going to miss about a month, but to still have him for the major part of the season is still huge. The Bills definitely needed a break like this. They already lost Milano. With all the new changes going on, to have Terrell Bernard go down would have been devastating for them. So that's that. The Bills kind of got away unscathed. One that was curious also was that Myles Garrett didn't practice yesterday. He appeared on the injury report with a foot injury. It was really just soreness, dealing with some foot soreness, according to some sources close to the Cleveland Browns. He's expected to play against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're going to need him to play to really shut down the door in Jacksonville. And speaking of Jacksonville, here the last injury to kind of keep you guys up to date is that, unfortunately for them, they already placed their top defensive back, Tyus Campbell, on the injured reserve, so he's going to be out for about a month. But now, head coach Doug Peterson announced that Darnell Savage, one of their safeties, is probably going to miss the Cleveland game, according to Peterson. He hurt his quad this week in practice. He didn't participate yesterday, and Doug Peterson mentioned that he's not anticipating Darnell Savage to be out there, which is another big blow to the Jaguars, because, again, I love their defensive line, but against the Browns offensive line that should be a little bit healthier if their tackles come back, it's not going to help that the wide receivers, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, are just getting open because you don't have Tyus Campbell. You don't have now Darnell Savage. It could be looking a little bit light back there and benefiting the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, Deshaun needs to win this game, so that's going to work more in their favor, certainly giving them more of an advantage, but it kind of also makes you think that the Browns, if they needed any more reason to win this game, now with these injuries, they should perform better, look better than they did against the Dallas Cowboys. But that's all I have on the injury front. That's all the latest updates that I wanted to bring you on some of these injuries, and that's also going to conclude our show for today. That's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. To catch more of this show, check out both the YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel, and the GSMC Sports Network channel as well, for a lot more content around the NFL and a variety of different ways regarding this show. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time to catch more of this show, talking about all the latest headlines around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me. Hope you guys enjoy the games this week. We're going to talk about all of them next week when we return back here on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that